This week in IT, I look at some of the differences between Microsoft Copilot Plus and Apple Intelligence, focusing on performance and privacy. Plus, DirectAccess is being deprecated and Teams Rooms gets a set of new features. So stay tuned to find out all the latest news. Welcome to This Week in IT, the show where I discuss everything connected to Microsoft 365, Azure, and Windows. But before I get started today, I've got a quick favour to ask you. About 80% of the people who watched last week's video weren't subscribed to the channel. So if you'd like to see these weekly news updates, then please subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell notification to make sure you don't miss out on the latest uploads. So if you saw last week's video on Windows recall, there was lots of great discussion about the potential privacy issues with that, and I'd like to thank everybody who watched the video and commented. And I'd like to just cover a little bit this week about what Apple announced at its conference in the last couple of weeks and some of the differences between what they're dubbing Apple Intelligent and Copilot Plus. Now, before we start talking about Copilot Plus, let's just get it clear what Copilot Plus actually is, because there are lots of different Copilot products that Microsoft has. So Copilot Plus is going to run on a new generation of PCs that are available already to buy starting this week. And these Copilot Plus features that are going to be built into Windows are all connected to generative AI. Now, this is an enterprise news channel, enterprise IT news channel, and it's important to understand that what we're discussing here is really more for consumers than it is for enterprises, although things like Windows recall would absolutely be useful for, users in a business, of course. But if you're using something like Copilot Pro or Copilot for Microsoft 365, it's worth understanding straight away that Microsoft already has access to all of your data. So this kind of conversation that we're having around privacy here is a little bit mute in some way. So this is really more of a consumer issue, but not entirely, which is why we're speaking about it. So Apple Intelligence is very similar to Copilot Plus in that it's bringing a whole load of generative AI features across Apple devices, whether it be an iPhone, iPad, or Mac OS. And they announced a lot of features and things that are mainly going to be integrated with what they're calling Siri 2.0. Now, Windows recall is the thing that created the most amount of fuss, so do go back and watch last week's video if you want to learn a little bit more about that. The closest thing that Apple has to that is what they're calling on-screen awareness for Siri. So if you make some kind of query to Siri that's going to use AI to get the answer, it can also have a look at what you've got open on the screen now and use the context of whatever apps and information that it can see there as part of the answer that it provides you. Now, Windows recall is a little bit different in that it's more like a historical search facility. So if you want to go back and find something that you were working on, 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, last year, that's really what Windows recall is about. Although they're using very similar technologies to basically be able to see the screen and then obviously perform some kind of optical character recognition on that screenshot to have that context awareness to enable search, or in the case of Siri, to provide better answers without you having to type in information that you can see in an app that you've got open, for instance. Now, so you should be aware that those two things are a little bit different. We're not really sure, Apple isn't saying whether on-screen awareness is just about what you see right now. Well, that's kind of what they're suggesting, or whether it records any historical information about what it sees. They're not saying that, so I think that we can assume that they're not doing that. So just be aware of the differences between these two features. Now, Apple announced a whole load of stuff connected to their Apple Intelligence software, and probably the most important thing is they said that it's really leaning towards keeping all of your private information on the device. As I said before, if you're an enterprise, Microsoft already has all of your information anyway, so this conversation is really not valid. But if you're a consumer, Apple is saying, well, No, with our setup, we're really leaning towards keeping it on device. But if we do have to send any personal information into the cloud, we're going to do that using a system that they call private cloud compute, that uses all sorts of technology to make sure that your data is never stored in the cloud, that it's fully encrypted, that Apple never has access to it, it runs on special Apple hardware in the cloud, and that they're going to allow independent security researchers to view this software so that it's not just Apple saying that it's secure, it will be inspected by other people. All this sounds like something that's really expensive to implement. I mean, I guess Apple are charging a premium for their software, so I guess they can fund it. And I do wonder how this is going to slow down any queries that you happen to make. But at the end of the day, Apple is saying, well, and then there's a third stage that, well, if we then have to send this data to OpenAI, because we also are able to access ChatGPT through Apple Intelligence, then we will give you the option to say, well, do you want us to allow that information to be passed on to a third party if you like, and you will always have control over that for every single query. Now, not only are Apple saying that they have a different approach to privacy than Microsoft's Copilot Plus, but they're also saying that the large language model that runs on the device performs significantly faster using, roughly equivalent hardware. So Apple has developed its own LLM for this. Microsoft has its own LLM, and Apple claiming theirs is considerably faster. Of course, until all this stuff starts shipping, Apple Intelligence we won't see until the fall. We're starting to get our hands on the Copilot Plus PCs right now, albeit with the Windows recall feature not there at the moment. That's being tested now in the insider preview ring, but of course you're still going to need to have that hardware to be able to test Windows recall. So that's what's going on. If you're an organization, this whole privacy conversation, probably you don't need to worry about it. You've already made the decision that you're going to trust Microsoft with your data. If you're a consumer, you've got a decision to make. Let me know what you think about all this fuss around Copilot Plus and Apple Intelligence privacy. Is it all a storm in a teacup? Maybe at this stage, people buying the new ARM-based Windows PCs are just interested in the significantly better performance and battery life and don't really care about all this Copilot Plus stuff too much. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Some other really important news for system administrators is that Microsoft announced that it's deprecating DirectAccess. Now, DirectAccess is a remote access solution that was supposed to make it easier for organizations and end users to access corporate resources when they're not in the office. Now, Windows 10 included a new feature called Always On VPN. That was always really intended to supersede DirectAccess, but DirectAccess is now officially going away, even though Microsoft hasn't really given a timetable for when that's going to happen. So if you're currently still using DirectAccess, then you're going to need to look at moving across to Always On VPN or another solution. Now, some of the advantages of Always On VPN, or probably the main advantage in my mind, is that you don't necessarily need to have Windows servers as the remote access point. Always On VPN is essentially a standard based around IKE version 2 and certificate-based authentication, and it works with other VPN providers, like Cisco AnyConnect and Checkpoint and a whole list of others. So you don't have to have a Windows server and you don't have to be domain joined. So you get rid of all of that. Of course, today it's not a fact that computers are always domain joined like they were in the past. There are a whole load of other advantages to this as well, like granular traffic filtering. You can trigger the VPN based on app usage. It supports modern authentication. So think Windows Hello for Business. It's much easier to implement, of course, because you don't require that domain join. It doesn't require group policy. It can be managed by mobile device management like Intune, for instance. It supports conditional access, of course, Microsoft Entra ID, and if you want system checks via a network policy server. So there are lots of reasons to move over to always on VPNs. Microsoft also announced a big update to Teams Rooms this week. So the main thing is that it's getting intelligent recap and Copilot capabilities similar to what we have in the standard Teams, all coming to Teams Room, and what Microsoft is saying is an AI feature. Everything's an AI feature these days, isn't it? So automatic camera switching. So if you have more than one camera, it'll automatically be able to select which it thinks is the best camera and make that switch for you. For IT administrators, there's lots of extra information now coming into the Teams Rooms Pro Management service. So you'll be able to do things like track inventory data, room and device usage data, providing insight for intelligent planning, and make data-informed upgrades to equipment and licenses. Now, all of this is only available if you have at least one Teams Rooms Pro or a Teams Shared Devices license. So all that intelligent information coming into the Pro Management service. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, because it helps us to get the video seen by more people on YouTube and to grow the channel. I'm going to leave another video on the screen for you now about Windows Recall, exactly what that is and the privacy concerns surrounding it. But that's it from me for this week, and I'll see you next time.